Blizzard has just released part 2 of their developer blog explaining more about the matchmaking system and detailing their goals and plans moving forward. If you missed part 1 of their blog, they talked mainly about the hidden MMR or matchmaking rating system, the problems they're facing with grouped up teammates and how it's throwing off balance within the matchmaking system, and how they're using the new player experience to set up new players for success in the game. Reception to that post was less than enthusiastic since the MMR system is still very confusing and there's not enough information given to players. The grouping problem still exists and players aren't able to play with who they want to, and while the matchmaking system for new players seems positive on its surface, we really don't know what's going on behind the scenes, nor do we really know what Blizzard defines as a new player. But looking into the new blog post, we're now talking about new systems they're looking to implement as soon as Season 3, as well as future plans they've got for Season 4 and beyond. Let's break it down. If you're looking for new ways to improve your game and get a jump start on the new season once it launches, be sure to check out the GameLeap website. You'll find everything from hero and role breakdowns to step-by-step ability and map guides. Check out this link to get your membership started. They start the post off by talking about how grouping with your friends might be causing disparity in the MMR between you, leading to imbalanced games. Let's get something straight, Blizzard. It's not the players' faults we want to play with our friends in your game. Grouping up is already a very tedious process for players trying to navigate Blizzard's competitive matchmaking system. They completely removed the LFG system we had in Overwatch 1, making it harder for players to find one another in order to play together. And the disconnected relationship between skill tier division and hidden MMR makes it difficult to pair up with teammates even if they might be a similarly skilled player as you, just because their rank got reset or maybe because they haven't been grinding out the game as much. To be clear, in case you didn't know, Blizzard chooses the players in which you'll play with or play against in the matchmaker based on your hidden MMR, a number that we're not allowed to see that tells Blizzard how good of a player we are. Your MMR will be changing based on every single win or loss that you play, however your skill tier will only update every 7 wins or 20 losses currently. This can lead to situations where 2 players who are currently grouped up will no longer be able to play together if one of their skill tiers updates before the other. This also leads to a very common situation where you'll be paired up with teammates with a very wide skill tier disparity because their quote-unquote MMR is close enough to yours to be matchmade with. However, those players at those same tiers would be unavailable to group with you regardless of whatever their MMR is. If I'm playing in a diamond game against diamond players, I don't want to see a bronze teammate on my team just because their MMR, according to Blizzard, is high enough to be in that game. These inconsistencies and lack of transparency from Blizzard leads only to frustration and confusion in players where we don't really know where our skill level is and we have no control over the teammates that we're able to group up with. And on top of all of that, this is only made worse every time a new season starts thanks to the partial skill rating decay that Blizzard has implemented. And again, the only thing that's decaying here is your skill tier, not your MMR. So while you'll still be the same player playing at the same skill level, this arbitrary reset of your rank will affect who you're able to group up with in the future. Thankfully, it looks like Blizzard's plans to address these pain points are coming next season. The way that the matchmaker is going to do this is to place pairs of players against each other who have similar MMR on the same role. So tanks on either team should have similar MMR levels, and each DPS or support should have a comparable member on the enemy team. While I think this is a great change to potentially help avoid some of the obvious tank diffs you've probably felt in your games, this doesn't really address anything to do with grouping up and all the problems with that. Now, I don't have all the numbers that Blizzard does, and I don't exactly know how their matchmaker works, but this seems like a change that should have been implemented the moment role queue started a couple years ago back in Overwatch 1. And I can actually think of a few problems that might be introduced because of this change. Imagine, for example, you've got a very high MMR DPS player paired up with a relatively low MMR support player who's constantly pocketing them and helping them find success. If this system doesn't pair the enemy team with a similar duo, then they'll simply have a strong DPS player and a weak support player in their game, without any of the synergy that comes with grouping. The goals for this change are clear, I'm just hoping Blizzard keeps a close eye on it and makes any adjustments they need to in the future. In addition to this, there's another change coming in Season 3 to the way skill tiers are presented to the player. Currently, you need to either win 7 games or lose 20 games in order to update your skill tier division. I don't think I've talked to a single player who's enjoyed this new system compared to the old SR system in Overwatch 1, but the idea for this system was relatively simple. They wanted to hide the change of SR that you were getting after every single match because it was adding stress to players having to watch that shiny number go down after every single loss. But to all the players who didn't want to be babied by Blizzard, this system just led again to more frustration and confusion. There's no transparency to your skill tier. We can't see our own hidden MMR, so we have no idea how we're improving or climbing up the ranks. And for the best players on the top 500 500 leaderboard, this problem is made even worse since they'll have no idea how much progress is required in order for them to overtake the players around them. Blizzard's proposed changes to these coming in Season 3 are as follows. They are changing the requirements to update your skill tier to 5 wins and 15 losses, down from 7 and 20, and they're going to be changing top 500 players to be able to see their top 500 leaderboard rank updated after every single match, basically going back to the original Overwatch 1 SR system. This is definitely a positive change for those top 500 players, giving them a better idea of how they stand up to their competition, but 5 and 15 for the rest of us definitely seems like way too long still. Personally, I'd be a fan of no more than forcing 3 wins or maybe 7 losses on these restrictions rather than 5 and 15. This is still potentially multiple days of playtime for players to have to grind through just to be able to see their rank update. Why do we feel the need to force players into so many games when their hidden MMR is already updating? Why can't we just show players where they sit sooner? They do go on to announce that at the very least they will be updating the UI, so any information about your progress towards that competitive skill update will be available to you. But this change won't be available until midway through Season 3. Which leads me to another concern of why aren't we seeing these changes happen sooner? Light number changes to the number of wins or losses required, or simply presenting information to the player shouldn't take months of development time. Players at every single rank have been complaining about this system ever since its debut when it launched with Overwatch 2 all the way back in October. And while we're seeing more dev updates than ever, we are still not seeing enough meaningful changes to see progress with these problems. But let's move on. Blizzard goes on to talk about what they're planning for the near future, starting with Season 4, and their plans to remove seasonal competitive rank resets and all sorts of seasonal rank decay. So in case you didn't know, decay was added to the game a while ago back in Overwatch 1 when players were stagnating at the top of the leaderboards, not being incentivized enough to play the game. Since then, they've also added a seasonal competitive rank reset that lowers your skill tier division by a few rungs every time there's a new season launched in Overwatch 2. These systems definitely have their faults. For example, why are we resetting competitive skill tier divisions when it doesn't change anyone's hidden MMR, only leading to more frustrations around climbing and grouping? But on the other side of things, why are we removing decay entirely without talking about the problems that it was implemented to address in the first place? Let's put this into an example. Let's say I've just improved a lot as a player and I'm hitting a new peak, maybe even getting myself into top 500 onto the leaderboard. Without any rank decay in the game, then there's no incentive for me to keep climbing if I don't think that I can keep winning games. Why would I risk my spot on the leaderboard if I'm more expecting to lose my next few games because I'm not sure if I belong here or not? This situation was more common than you might think back in Overwatch 1, where a good chunk of top 500 players would simply only play their placement games, get placed near top 500 again, and then simply stop playing for the season so they'd get the maximum amount of rewards. These types of players are exactly why many high-level players were calling for a full-on MMR reset with the launch of Overwatch 2, since most players weren't deemed to be keeping up with their skill level because they didn't play enough games. I do at least very much agree with removing the skill tier decay between seasons. I mean, it wasn't affecting the matchmaking system anyway, it just made players feel worse than they actually were. The only problem with removing it entirely is that it kind of takes away from the identity of Overwatch seasons. If this moves forward without any changes, the only difference you'll feel between seasons is to your wallet for having to buy another battle pass. But as of right now, we're not entirely sure what Blizzard's explicit plans are for the future, so we'll have to keep an eye out for more dev updates. What I'm hoping to see at least is more meaningful rewards for players at the end of a season and keeping some level of MMR decay above a certain rank threshold. And that's just basically what they were already doing in Overwatch 1, so please just stop trying to reinvent the wheel. The rest of the blog post is dedicated to rounding out their closing thoughts about the ongoing changes they have cooking, as well as answering some frequently asked questions from players. Most of these player questions are pretty straightforward, but a few of them I feel were left unanswered, so I wanted to go into those. First question being, do you deliberately place players into winner queues and loser queues? I'm sure many of us have definitely felt like they've been part of the loser queue, but according to Blizzard, your MMR is the only thing the matchmaker takes into consideration when forming your matches. It won't use any previous win or loss history against you when deciding your next games. That all sounds well and good, but what they're not telling us is how much our MMR is fluctuating between matches. If you win a couple games in a row, you might not be directly put in a game you're supposed to lose, but your MMR might have shifted wildly, putting you in a game that is considerably harder than the previous games you were recently playing. Ultimately, it's impossible to know this unless Blizzard lets us see our hidden MMR number. There's another follow-up question asking about large win or loss streaks, which again, Blizzard says doesn't have anything to do with the matchmaking system, but again doesn't tell us anything about how MMR is shifting in those situations. Another question asks if your performance in-game is going to have any effect over your change in MMR after each match. I wanted to include this here because I believe there's some confusion going around amongst players around this topic, and Blizzard makes it very clear that your MMR adjustment is not shifted by your performance at any skill tier. So regardless of how well you perform, it's all about the win-loss. But once again, since we can't see our MMR or the average MMR of either team, we don't really know how much that means, how much our wins or losses are worth at the end of the day. Blizzard has communicated previously that your MMR adjustment will be different based on the game that you're in. For example, if your team's average MMR is lower than your enemy's, that win will be worth more, or it will cost you less if you lose. Again, this just leaves players wanting for more information. If we only knew our current MMR number or that of our teammates around us, we would better understand why we're in the game that we're in, and better understand why we're getting placed differently in our skill tiers. In any case, some of these changes are just around the corner, with Season 3 beginning in only a few days. Keep your eyes out for potentially better match-made games, as well as faster skill tier division updates with those changes coming in Season 3. What do you guys think of these changes overall? Are you excited for the new matchmaker? Are you excited to see what the new seasons will bring in general? Maybe you're hoping to see some overhaul of the system we haven't even talked about yet. Let us know down in the comments. And even if these changes aren't everything we've hoped for, it does seem like Blizzard is listening, even taking the time to answer some of our most prevailing questions. So don't be afraid to get your voice out there and let them know what you want to see. That's going to be it for me today, folks. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. If you're looking for new ways to improve your game and get a jump start on the new season once it launches, be sure to check out the GameLeap website. You'll find everything from hero and role breakdowns to step-by-step ability and map guides. Check out this link to get your membership started.